But he'd written it so, that particular piece was sort of, I just really liked it very much. And it's a very good example of a chap sitting there. You've done one, correct?
Yes, I did.
And the, so it's no good just saying, you know, sort of, no, I think I'll nip down to the games room, stretch my legs, have a game of ping pong, what about you? That doesn't get anyone anywhere. You've got to be in Pinterland and be as real, but in Pinterland's terms. I think I'll nip down to the games room, stretch my legs, have a game of ping pong. What about you, fancy a game? How would you like a categorical thrashing? Now, hold on a minute. Categorical thrashing is not amenable to the usual method search for truth approach, you know. It isn't. You have to enter Pinterland to say, how would you like a categorical thrashing? You know, I'm willing to accept any stakes, any gauntlet, any challenge you care to fling down. What have you done with your gauntlets, by the way? In fact, while we're at it, what happened to your motorbike? He writes, doesn't he write great stuff for actors? You look bold in black. The only thing I didn't like was your face.
We were wondering if either he or you actually rode a motorbike.
No.
And if there are elements of actual personal information in that monologue between the two of you.
No, there wasn't really.
Some sort of imaginative whole cloth.
No, it just came out the motorbike. But there's all bits of tapestry from our past. Like, all the same, you and I, even then, never mind the weather, weren't we? We were always available for net practice at the drop of a hat, or a game of fives, or a walk and talk through the park, or a couple of rounds of putting before lunch, given fair to moderate conditions and no burdensome commitments. It isn't ordinary conversation. People who say that Harold recorded ordinary conversations so brilliantly aren't anywhere near the mark. He heard it, understood it, and then transmuted it into something else.
You met Harold during the war as an evacuee.
Yes.
You didn't actually become close friends and associates until, as you said before, the equivalent of an 11th grade in American high school.
Yes.
What was that particular atmosphere, relationship like?
Well,
I know you had a great teacher in common.
Joe Brearley,
yeah,
who put Harold in his plays, you know, the Scottish play, and Romeo and Juliet, he played Romeo. He was a great influence on us all because he introduced us to this poetry, and we felt, well, Harold introduced us all, educated us all, really. He was the chap who introduced us to James Joyce and Yeats and the films of Buñuel and Salvador Dali. And do you think we looked at him with respect and said, oh, this is marvellous? What is it now? What's all this Buñuel rubbish, you know, and Shan Andalou, where they eyes slashed with the razor up? What's all that meant to be then? You know, but we secretly, we died rather than admitted that we admired and loved him. He was always ahead of the game with girls and with plays. He'd drag us to see plays. He'd take us to Dylan Thomas, reading poetry, and George Barker and these people. And he was ahead. He'd read, you know, Céline, James Joyce, and then one day we were pouring with rain, we had no money at all, and he came out of a lending library in Hoxton. Hoxton was where the centre of fascism in our part of the world, for a bunch of Jew boys who wandered around there was really asking for trouble. But it's raining, bowled into Haggerson Road Public Library. He came out and he had obviously a book under his jacket. We looked at him, what's that? What's that? You've got a book there, haven't you? What? Oh, no. Come on, you've nicked a public bloody library book. How low can you bloody sink? What is it? What is it? So he wasn't the revered figure. He actually was. We loved him. He was the leader, really. I'll admit it. So he pulled out one of his jacket, and it was Murphy. by Samuel Beckett. This is 1947, long before anybody but the cognoscenti knew anything about Samuel Beckett. 1953, Peter Hall did Waiting for Godot. But he pulled up Murphy. I said, what? What have you done? Look, you've deprived 12 char ladies of the chance to read, what was his name, Samuel Beckett. And he said, but it hasn't been taken out since 1939, 1947. So he introduced all these things to us. And
that same book was in his study when he died.
Yeah.
Really?
And by then, that edition was worth about £20,000.
Isn't that interesting?
First edition of Murphy.
Yeah.
But it still had the Hoxton Public Library ticket holder in the front.
Isn't that marvellous?
I should have nicked it, actually, but I didn't.
Oh, dear boy.
Getting back to cricket.
Oh, yes.
That was sort of the door through which you walked in your relationship to Harold.
Yeah.
Could you talk about that a little bit?
He's a great cricketer.
So I've heard. How you first met him in this way?
Well, I met him through cricket. I was probably 18 or 19 years old, so it was about 1981 or 2, and I was about to go to the same drama school that he went to 2 drama schools, one of which he hated, RADA, the Royal Academy. He faked a nervous breakdown in order to get out because he hated it so much. There's a beautiful line in one of these prose pieces here where he talks about running out onto Gower Street, leaping onto a bus and meeting you lot up at Lord's and arriving at the nursery end just in time to see Dennis Compton late cut down to the boundary for 4. He said it was one of the most beautiful evenings of my whole life. This moment where he was not only free but released into the world of cricket. I was a passionate cricketer too. Harold had joined this club called Gaieties Cricket Club, which was a theatre-based team originally, and he'd become the captain by the mid-60s. And so by the time I joined, he was 50, 51, and had just come to the end of was coming to the end of his playing life. A friend of mine said, can you play for me? I can't play. Can you go along and play on Sunday? And I said, no, I'm not.
So you were pinch hitting?
Yeah, but I declined. I said, I can't. And my friend Jonathan then said to me, Harold Pinter will be at this game. And I knew Harold's name because of No Man's Land, which I'd seen at the National with John Gielgud.
As a very young lad.
As a 14-year-old. And been overwhelmed by the atmosphere of the play. I hadn't understood it at all, of course, but I'd been absolutely struck by the atmosphere, the tension, the mixture of the comic and the menacing.
Which I think is the way into many of his plays.
Well, I mean, especially for someone who's already feeling called towards theatre and acting. Yeah. I mean, to have seen Gielgud and Richardson playing those 2 parts that they were so supremely accomplished in, I mean, it was just a gift. So I'd heard his name, and I said to my friend Jonathan, I'll play. And I went along. And you were? I was 18. I mean, really quite ignorant. Not to really not know much about Harold Pinter as an 18-year-old is pretty ignorant. I'd taken English A-level and was being taught by the same man who had taught Harold's son, Daniel. But I didn't know much about Harold. I just knew about No Man's Land. Anyway, that's where I met him. And he, at the end of that game, he said, well, you're Burton, are you? Well, you're playing for us now. So that's that. And I'm still playing for Gaieties now. It's 2012.
Are you still the captain?
No, I'm not the captain. I'm humble, a mere outfielder. I'm available to dispense wisdom to anybody who'd care to. But
he's a very good cricketer.
I'm a very average club cricketer, but to be in a club...
He's a very good average club.
To be in a club that Harold was involved with was, supremely...
so you played
fun
on his team for 5, 6, 7 years.
Well, I'm still playing now.
Well,
so
before there was a theatre.
Well, yeah, I was training to be an actor. So within 3 years, I was a professional actor, and almost immediately tried to help me, tried to give me a job, offered me work, offered me to understudy in a play with Faye Dunaway. I couldn't do it because I didn't have an equity card, but he was trying to help me, as he tried to help so many young actors, young writers. He simply, if he felt he could give you a leg up in life, he didn't hesitate. He didn't have to ask. He would try and